Why was the Great Wall built, and was it actually effective? Hey everybody, this is the Scholar General Mojian Debing. Today we're going to be talking about the Great Wall. But the first thing to know about the Great Wall is that it's not great and it's not a wall. Actually, it's kind of a network or a series of walls that were built up across Chinese history by different dynasties for all kinds of different reasons. Down in the comments below, let me know if you've been to the Great Wall and which part you went to, and if you haven't been, then tell me which part you'd like to go see, like the old part or the new part or anything. The first time that you ask why build the Great Wall, like the major response that you usually get is to keep out the Mongols, keep out those nomadic invaders. This is definitely a reality that for certain dynasties, and, particularly there are a few states during the Warring States and the Jin Dynasty as well as the Ming Dynasty. They were really concerned with nomadic invaders and they built walls, but it's never that straightforward. If we look particularly at the Ming Dynasty, we can see this really clearly. So the Emperor of China, just like any head of state, gets a lot of advice and help from people in order to run the empire dynasty. And during the Ming, you had a huge bureaucracy of government officials as well as a lot of eunuchs that were within the court. There were two factions or schools of thought about what to do with the Mongol problem. The first one was, you go invade, you go fight them, drive them off, scatter them. The other rival faction to this was basically saying, nope, we have to trade with the Mongols, we have to appease them, and just, they'll leave us alone as long as we give them nice things. These two sides could never see eye to eye, and it was always a back and forth to an extent, but the one thing that they could always agree on was we have to protect ourselves, we need to build walls. So, that's what they did. The personality of the Jiajing Emperor is also quite important here because the Jiajing Emperor, unlike many other emperors, was not born to be the Emperor of China. He actually was, he was a minor noble, and the emperor died without a son, so they just kind of grabbed him and threw him in. And because of that, because of his more humble origins, he always felt threatened with the idea of him being illegitimate, that he wasn't actually supposed to be emperor. And because of that, he became very attached to ritual and ostentatious displays of how important he was and how he was the emperor and everybody needed to follow him because of he was in this position. But this also meant that he did not want to engage in trade or tribute with the Mongols. The way that tribute worked in ancient China is kind of complicated. I'm not going to get all the details here, but basically, you have outside states or nomadic peoples who will come in and they'll give China some stuff, but in return, China always gives them more. Now, some people would argue that this is protection money that you're giving to the Mongols. You're trying to pay them off to keep them from taking over. And others argue that China is trying to show how superior they are by how much better stuff and more stuff they can make than the other people. And, both of those things are kind of at play here. But regardless of that, the Jiajing Emperor did not want to do this with the Mongols. He just outright refused. And then, the Mongols started raiding. And his response, instead of going on these huge costly wars to go and invade, was to just build a bunch of walls. And that's what he did. So many of those Ming Dynasty walls that you see today when you look at postcards and stuff, a lot of those were built for ostensibly defensive reasons, but walls can also be built for other reasons. For example, the Han Dynasty, they expanded the Great Wall really far out into the west, and it wasn't because they're trying to really protect anything there, it's because you use a wall as an offensive tool. Basically, it's like putting a fortress somewhere, you're trying to capture territory. And the wall is just another way to do that kind of stretches out and it can serve as a very good communication line because they would use smoke signals to say, oh, the Huns or the Xiongnu are coming, so let's, get our armies ready. A wall does not just have to be defensive, it can also be offensive, and you can, encircle territory that you don't actually own and then claim it to be yours and things like this. And this kind of thing also happens quite a bit in certain dynasties. Now, another reason to build walls is actually related to economics. That might sound counterintuitive because walls are extremely costly and take up a whole lot of money and resources, but basically there were certain walls built by states that extended way out into Mongolia or into Liaoning, way far north. There's scholars who aren't sure what these are because they're basically just a little mound and it's not much of a real wall. It would have, of course, been taller back in the day, but it's not the most defensive structure. And the current theory of what they were doing here, is they're actually trying to control some like goat herders and make them pass through certain gates so that they can tax them. Because one of the hard things to do is tax nomadic people who just keep wandering around on the steppe all the time, or grass plains, and don't ever have to go and pay you money. And by making them pass through certain points, control points, you can make them, pay you some taxes. And so there's one more reason why certain walls were built. But was wall building at a massive scale like this actually effective, or was it just kind of a waste of time? Now, there's some people who would say that it's a waste of time because, you're dumping all these energy and resources, but there's quite a few notable examples where people and nomadic invaders were just able to come in and take over anyway. But I think that they're missing a couple things. Number one, the walls can work if they are properly manned. And the problem is that many dynasties either did not put enough people on the walls, or the people that they put on the walls were not up to par. For example, whenever the Mongols were conquering the Jin dynasty, they actually got locked up a little bit at Zhuyongguan, which is the most important pass that you have to get through to get to modern-day Beijing. They weren't able to get through it, but what they did was they did one of their famous tactics of famed retreat. The Jin actually pursued them, and then, it caused a whole, ambush and a whole mess, but basically it had to do with the quality of generalship at the wall at that time. There's another example where the Manchus were conquering the Ming dynasty, and basically, the army shows up, and the person manning the wall looks at the tides of history and sees a failing Ming dynasty on one side and a rising dynasty on the other, and he just lets them in because it's in his interest. It's not in his... The problem is, if you want to keep a good, strong wall, the wall is not making the state stronger. The state has to be powerful in order to make the wall work. And the good example of that is like the Han Dynasty. The Han Dynasty was immensely powerful, and they weren't stopped. I mean, there were times where the Xiongnu were able to break through, and because the wall is so long, and you can find sections that might not be as visible and break through them and then slip your army in real quick. But all in all, the system of beacons still worked, and the Han Dynasty was able to project power immensely far, way into Central Asia, in part because they were already powerful and they focused that energy into walls. So the question isn't, does the wall keep invaders out? The question is, does the dynasty actually have the political and economic power to use walls effectively, either for offense, defense, or for economic control? Now, down in the comments below, let me know what you think about all of this. And if you love content like this, then please subscribe. If you don't love content like this, still subscribe, but tell me what you want to see. Thank you all so much for watching, and as always, don't forget to stay sharp.